Chapter 22. A problem with the independent justice. After much deliberation and debate, the commission members have finally been chosen. There are 5 senators consisting of 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. From the House of Representatives there are 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and from the Supreme Court there are 2 definite Democrats and 2 Republicans, with the last justice being the odd man out. This last justice is not partial to either party, even though he was, at one time, a Republican. He is Justice David Davis from Illinois. Years before, he was a big supporter of President Lincoln and worked closely with Lincoln to be a founder of the Republican Party. However, after the Civil War, he switched his alliances after Lincoln was assassinated. He gave his devotion to the then Vice President, Andrew Johnson, after Johnson was sworn into the presidency. The radical Republicans, annoyed by his disloyalty, thought of him as the odd man out. They believed he would someday run for president as a Democrat. The special commission would probably not have been agreed to by the Democrats, if Davis wasn't chosen to serve on the commission. What no one, including Davis, realized at the time was that his name was being considered and voted on by the Illinois legislators to elect him as their senator, which they did on January 25, just before the special commission passed. Tilden had known about the Illinois legislators' decision weeks before the vote took place and never said a word to Hewitt about it. In response, Davis accepted his new position as senator and immediately resigned his position as a justice on the Supreme Court. At that time, Congressman Hewitt, along with many other Democrats, were stunned by his actions. They believed the newly elected Davis would not be starting his Senate term until March 4, which would leave him with plenty of time to complete his obligations to the Special Commission and the disputed electoral certificates. But now, because of his immediate resignation from the Supreme Court, he will no longer be able to serve on the newly formed Special Commission. This instantaneous news thrills the Republicans, because they believed Davis would have gone for Tilden and not Hayes. The other newly formed Electoral Commission members now have to first resolve the issue of who will take Davis's place. So far, the people serving on the commission are House Representatives Henry Payne, Democrat from Ohio, Eppa Hunton, Democrat from Virginia, Josiah Abbott, Democrat from Massachusetts, James Garfield, Republican from Ohio, and George Frisbee Hoare, Republican from Massachusetts. On the Senate side it is Alan Thurman, Democrat from Ohio, Thomas Bayard, Democrat from Delaware, Oliver Hazard Perry Throckmorton, commonly known as Oliver P. Morton, Republican from Indiana, George Edmunds, Republican from Vermont, and Frederick Theodore Frelinghuysen, Republican from New Jersey. The Supreme Court justices are Democrat Stephen J. Field from California and Nathan Clifford of Minnesota, and Republican Samuel F. Miller from Iowa and William Strong of Pennsylvania. For the now empty 5th seat on the commission, the remaining justices decide on Republican Joseph P. Bradley, originally from New York, but now residing in New Jersey. He is chosen because he's known to both parties to be an independent-minded man and always judges his cases with fairness. Immediately following this last-minute choice, the Democrats cry foul, because President Grant had chosen Bradley for the Supreme Court in order to overturn the legal tender ruling, greenbacks, and there was now only 33 days left before Grant is to leave office. On the flip side, one of Hayes' older sons gets so excited by the news that Justice Bradley had been selected as a replacement for Davis that he wires his father, telling him that he's going to be the next president of the United States. On February 1, 1877 at 1 p.m. the Special Commission is signed into law by Grant, giving the 15 men from the Supreme Court, Senate and Congress the power to decide on who will be the next president. 8 of the 15 are Republicans and 7 are Democrats. Their primary duty is to decide which of the disputed electoral certificates, tossed to them by Congress during their electoral count, are valid and which are not. After putting his signature on the document, President Grant felt like he had not a care in the world as he waits in his office. Relaxed, he is seated comfortably behind his desk, smoking one of his favorite cigars, and reading a book. He knows the matter is now out of his hands. Even though he has believed all along that Tilden rightfully won the presidency by the people's vote, as far as he's concerned, he has played his part and has been loyal to the Republican Party. Inside the Capitol House chambers, there is standing room only. Speaker of the House Randall is seated next to, but below, Ferry, the Senate President pro tempore. There are 4 tellers on the floor in the front of the room. They are ready to assist and chronicle the electoral certificates as they are opened. These certificates will be opened alphabetically, verified, and then will be counted or rejected. The rejected certificates will then be immediately turned over to the 15 members of the Special Commission. It will then be the Commission's responsibility to decide which of these rejected certificates will be deemed valid. Standing close but not next to each other in the rear of the room are John Reed and Zach Chandler. Both men have come to observe the House activities, along with the hundreds of other spectators in the room. Some of these other spectators are visiting diplomats from other countries who want to witness this extraordinary event in American democracy. As people walk through the chamber, each finding their seat or, in some cases, just a place to stand, they can hardly hear themselves think as the room is filled with low tone of whispering chatter. The atmosphere grows tense and more exciting than a Shakespeare play ready for the opening curtain. Never in the history of American politics has there been such looming doubt or disagreement over a presidential election. Every person present is anxious and wants to be a part of and bear witness to this unfolding event. And each quietly wonders, will it be Tilden or Hayes? The clock on the wall strikes 1 chime. Representatives Fields, Castman and Senator Sargent watch Senator Ferry as he walks to the House of Representatives' desk, which is normally occupied by the Speaker of the House. House Speaker Randall is sitting beside him. Senator Ferry clears his throat and shouts, "The joint session is now called to order." The certificates will be opened in alphabetical order, starting with the state of Alabama. He opens a wooden box and takes out the first sealed certificate from Alabama and hands it to one of the 4 tellers in the room. The teller opens the certificate and reads it out loud. Alabama casts its 10 electoral votes for Samuel J. Tilden. The process continues smoothly until he comes to the state of Florida. There are 3 different sets of certificates submitted, and as the tellers open them, they call out each of the 3's results. 4 votes for Hayes. 4 votes for Tilden. 4 votes for Tilden. Senator Ferry calls out, "Are there any objections to the certificates from Florida?" Representative Fields stands and bellows, "I object to the first set of certificates." Senators Sargent and Casson stand and call out in turn, "I object to the second and third sets." Senator Ferry scans the room with his eyes and asks out loud, "Are there any further objections?" He waits for a response and there is none. He then calls out loudly, ruling, "There being none, the papers will be sent to the Electoral Commission." At that point, the congressman and 2 senators who voiced their objections stand and proceed to submit their objections in writing to the tellers. The voices in the room continue their low whispers and John Reed and Zach Chandler look at each other with sly smiles. The counting process continues. More objections are voiced and submitted for the certificates submitted from the states of Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oregon. Finally, after all the certificates are opened and counted, the final tally leaves neither candidate with a clear victory. The certificates from the states of Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oregon are then turned over to the Electoral Commission. It will be up to the Commission to decide which are valid and to be counted. Earlier in the previous year of 1876, before the election, the Senate had voted to eliminate the 22nd Joint Rule. If that rule had still been in place, then the states that submitted the duplicate and triplicate returns would have been tossed out and the states' votes would not have counted. In that case, Tilden would have won the presidency without dispute. Tilden had received 184 electoral votes and Hayes 165. In order to steal the presidency away from Tilden, who had already beaten Hayes by 254,235 popular votes, the Republicans needed all of the 20 disputed votes to give Hayes a majority of 1. The 2 vice presidential candidates, Republican Wheeler from New York and Democrat Hendricks from Indiana, were just as anxious for the outcome, and wanted to know if they had a job in Washington or not. February 2, 1877. On the following day, inside a conference room at the Capitol building, the 5 senators, 5 congressmen and 5 Supreme Court justices chosen for the special commission are seated around a long table. They are in a small, cramped room where there is hardly any space for spectators. In the corner of the room, there is a large cuspidor, spittoon, which stands out like a sore thumb. Standing just inside the door, Speaker Randall motions to Congressman Hewitt to step outside into the hall with him. Catching this motion out of the corner of his eye, Justice Bradley looks up from the paper certificates in front of him on the table and gazes at both men when they walk out of the room. He is quite aware of the fact that he is the deciding vote on these disputed certificates, and whichever way he decides, he is going to be disappointing a lot of good people. He also realizes that as a Republican, he will be critically judged and heavily scorned by his party if he votes on the side of the Democrats. After quietly exiting the special commission room, Randall and Hewitt stand in the hallway, just a few feet away from the door. In a low voice, Randall says to Hewitt, "Justice Bradley has a reputation of fairness and honesty amongst his peers, but nonetheless, he is a Republican and loyal to his party. I have a really bad feeling about this." Hewitt nods in agreement. "I've heard some things I don't like. It's too late now to do anything about it now." Randall snipes. "We may have been better off if we'd listened to Mr. Tilden when he advised us to debate. At least that way, all of this would have been in the open and the public would have been aware." He then points back toward the room where the special commission has assembled and continues. "As it is, all of this secrecy is going to allow just one person to decide the presidency." Hewitt looks around to see if anybody is listening. Then, almost in a whisper he replies, "I was told by Taylor and Gibson that they spoke with Justice Bradley at his home and he assured them he was going to give the Florida electors to Tilden." Randall, slightly raising his voice, fires back, "Governor Drew in Florida had his own problems. He had to sue the Republicans to get a recount to win his governor's job. We no longer have that option." Keeping his voice low, Hewitt places his hand on Randall's arm. Bradley knows the truth. The only certificates that should be counted as legal from Florida should be Governor Drew's, since he is the legal governor. Randall smirks and snipes, "I heard $200,000 is the going price these days for a change of heart." Back inside the conference room, Justice Bradley looks back to the documents placed before him. He tries to concentrate on the papers, but, feeling the heavy burden placed on his shoulders, his mind begins to wander. Still looking at the papers, but not really seeing them, he thinks back to what happened a few nights before. Early in that evening, Democrats Taylor and Gibson arrived at Bradley's house. He had had a brief talk with the 2 men, and all 3 men seemed in agreement. They shook hands and the 2 Democrats departed. When Taylor and Gibson left, they were convinced that Justice Bradley was going to write his opinion in favor of counting the Florida votes for the Democrats. But minutes later, after Taylor and Gibson departed, 2 unknown burly men who were waiting in a carriage out of sight drove their carriage toward Bradley's home. Still standing outside, Bradley watches as they climb down from the carriage and walk toward him. He shakes hands with one of the men and the second man hands him a large envelope and pats him on the shoulder. Bradley, not amused by the gift, tries to give the envelope back but the men refuse to take it. The 2 men turn and walk away from him and climb back into their carriage waving as they drive off. Bradley is stunned when he rips open the envelope and pulls out a large stack of cash. He knows the bribe is a threat and could end his life as he knows it.